I am Kelly and I'm currently 28 years old. Recently, I discovered that the car I bought for my parents was given to my sister, Claire. From a young age, I felt that my sister and I were treated differently, but this incident has highlighted the extent of that disparity more clearly than ever. I had always known that my parents' affection and consideration were particularly generous towards my sister, but I've increasingly felt that it hasn't been sufficiently directed towards me. Especially in situations like this recent significant event, the fact that my parents didn't provide any explanation to me seems to further highlight the disparity. This feeling of discomfort has always been present, but I never expected it to manifest in such a clear form. I grew up with my sister Claire, who is 3 years younger than me, but from a young age, it was clear that we were treated differently by our parents. Before my sister was born, I was cherished by our parents. Every effort I made was praised, and I felt their love as a child. However, the moment my sister was born, the situation drastically changed, which I still remember vividly. It seemed as though my sister's presence became something special to our parents, and at the same time, a new role was imposed on me. That role was to be reliable and to take good care of my sister. For me, still very young, this felt like a responsibility suddenly thrust upon me. Although I was at an age where I still wanted to play, I gradually found myself expected to be the good older sister, and I started to feel less freedom to act as I wished. Whenever a problem arose in the family or I forgot my homework, it was not just seen as a mistake but as unsisterly. On the other hand, my sister never seemed to be subjected to such severity. My sister, who resembled our beautiful mother, was often described by her as irresistibly adorable. As for me, I strongly resembled my paternal grandfather, who had opposed my parents' marriage, perhaps making it harder for my mother to show me affection. When my sister acted spoiled, she was often indulged, and family conversations always centered around her minor successes and actions. Every time I observed this, even at a young age, I inevitably understood that my role within the family was to strive and yield. One of the most memorable moments was when I achieved good grades as a result of my hard work in an extracurricular activity. I returned home excited to see how my family would react, but the conversation at dinner that evening was dominated by stories of how many acorns my sister had collected. My desire to be recognized and appreciated simply faded away in that atmosphere. Such minor episodes repeated often, gradually making me hesitant to share my joys and sorrows with my family. This feeling intensified because I believed that anything I shared would be diminished in comparison to my sister. My sister, unlike me, never had to deal with the responsibility, pressure, and was allowed to act freely under the warm gaze of our family. How this shaped her personality, I don't know, but she was always a bright and confident child, the opposite of what people thought of me. Sometimes my sister seemed aware of the special treatment, and when I asked, "Why am I always the one getting scolded?" she showed no reaction. This prompted a persistent question from my childhood. How can I be loved by my family? Looking back, perhaps our parents did not consciously favor my sister but had so many expectations of me that they went too far. However, as a child, I couldn't understand this and felt increasingly isolated within the family. This disparity deeply etched into my heart, even as an adult, makes me feel awkward in my relationships with my sister and our parents. Every time I see my sister being treated specially, I lose sight of where I stand, growing up carrying the desire to be loved and recognized. Our home was never wealthy, and there was no room for unnecessary luxuries in our budget. Daily life was always a struggle, with no room for unnecessary luxuries. Even purchasing necessities often required careful calculation. Despite this, my sister always seemed to get what she wanted. I often saw my sister getting whatever she wanted, whether it was new clothes, toys, or trendy items. This frequently stirred complex feelings within me. I rarely desired material things, instead finding satisfaction with what I had and cherishing what was given to me. Yet, my sister freely followed her desires, acquiring things I had refrained from wanting. My parents consistently emphasized the importance of education, repeatedly advising me, "Study diligently for your future." I took these admonitions to heart and focused earnestly on my studies throughout my upbringing. The elementary school play was supposed to be a special day for me. After long rehearsals, I played a villager, a modest role, but I diligently learned my lines and prepared my costume. Although nervous, I hoped to fulfill my part well on the day. When my scene began, I delivered each line as practiced, clearly and precisely. However, a glance at the audience suddenly filled me with surprise and loneliness. My parents were nowhere to be seen. When it was my sister's turn to perform, my parents were there, cameras rolling, smiling and watching her every move with pride. It turned out that my parents had temporarily left their seats to move to a better spot and prepare their camera for my sister's performance. My sister was playing the lead role of a princess in the play, and they intended to capture her scene carefully on video. During my performance, it became clear that they were not concerned with me at all. I distinctly remember feeling as though a hole had opened up in my chest, and on the way home that day, I couldn't say anything to anyone. I just silently shed tears inside. I felt that my parents' love was directed solely towards my sister, and I pondered why the treatment between us was so different. It was always my sister who received new clothes and toys, while it seemed natural for me to endure and give up things for her sake. Without understanding why, as a child, I quietly endured days feeling like I didn't exist within my family. Through these experiences, a strong belief was etched into me to carve my own path through life. This belief has become a firm support in my life today. After graduating from college, I was able to secure a stable job in a technical field. Choosing this career was not only due to my own efforts but also thanks to the support of my father. Although it often seemed that only my sister Claire received preferential treatment, my father always supported me quietly. Even during school events, he would take photos of me, even from a distance. It was also my father who paid for my education. Thinking of how my usually reticent and awkward father had quietly saved money for me filled my heart with a tightness. Therefore, once I started working and earning a stable income, I made it my goal to gradually repay my father's kindness. At first, I was barely managing to support my own life, but by saving diligently, the time finally came when I could express my gratitude in a tangible way. I decided to gift my father a Lexus, a car he had mentioned long ago as one he hoped to drive someday. I remembered him bringing it up, a rare occurrence since he was a man of few words from my childhood and seldom expressed his desires openly. I vividly remember the day of the delivery. When I handed the keys to my father, his surprised expression gradually turned into a broad smile. It became a special day for me as well. What struck me most was seeing my father trying to hold back tears, saying, "I'm so happy to see how well you've grown up." Until then, there had been many instances of striving for the sake of my family, but this was the first time I could express my gratitude in such a joyful manner. When my parents received the car, they openly expressed their joy, saying, "We never imagined such a day would come." Seeing my father's genuine happiness made me realize anew the importance of expressing gratitude. Although I had once felt that I didn't receive as much affection compared to my sister, I finally realized that my father had always been pushing me forward, considering my future. The gift of the Lexus was not only a testament to my efforts but also a significant gesture of reciprocating the love and sacrifices my father had made for me. Initially, I had thought about discussing the car loan with my parents and sharing the responsibility, but seeing their emotional response, I decided to take full responsibility and pay off the 3-year loan myself. This decision wasn't easy, but I felt it was the appropriate way to show my gratitude. My sister, seeing the new car, smiled and exclaimed, "It's really cool." However, my sister had finished high school but neither continued to university nor started working. Seeing her depend on our parents and spend her time leisurely brought up complex feelings for me. While I continued to work hard and show my appreciation to our parents, my sister's carefree behavior felt somewhat irresponsible. Nevertheless, as a family, I reminded myself that it was more important to accept than to expect. I continued to work diligently, cutting unnecessary expenses to ensure I could repay the car loan. About a year after I gave the car to my parents, I went to my favorite cafe on a day off. As I entered the parking lot, I spotted the familiar Lexus. Surprised, I thought. Maybe my parents like this cafe too, and smiled as I went inside. However, I didn't see my parents anywhere. Instead, I found my sister at a window seat, relaxing and chatting happily with a friend. "It's been a while. I thought our parents were here because of the Lexus. Did you borrow the car?" I asked. My sister looked up at me, startled, and began to speak uncomfortably. "I asked our parents to let me have the car," my sister said. I was puzzled by her words and took a moment to understand the situation. A whirlwind of emotions swirled inside me. I hadn't anticipated that the car I gifted for our parents would be passed on to my sister. My sister herself meant no harm and said, "It's a nice car, and I wanted to show it off to my friends." But I felt as if my efforts and gratitude were being taken lightly, and I couldn't hide my shock. Of course, my parents might have given the car to my sister wanting to help her, but thinking about how much I had invested in that gift left me with an indescribable sense of frustration. I went home that day without having a deep conversation with my sister, but I felt that we needed to have a serious family discussion about this event. Now, instead of getting emotional, I am trying to reassess my relationship with my family calmly, thinking about how to interact with my sister and our parents. The next weekend, I went home to have a face-to-face conversation with my parents. I felt it was necessary to express the discomfort and dissatisfaction I had been feeling directly. While I was a bit anxious, I started the conversation with determination. As we began to talk, it initially seemed that my parents did not understand why I felt so strongly. However, as I pressed on, each of our perspectives and circumstances gradually became clear. "Why did you casually give the car to Claire?" "I gave it to you," I questioned. My father started to respond. "That's true," when my mother interrupted. "What's the problem? It's our freedom to use what we received however we want," she said. "That's true, but I wish you had consulted me first." "I gave it for you, Dad," I replied. My mother strongly argued that they were free to use their gift as they wished, which felt quite insensitive to my questions and complaints. I also asked something that had been on my mind. How did Claire pay for her driving lessons? She's not working, so I can't imagine she had the money. My mother looked uncomfortable and answered, "Claire asked us, and we paid for it." I had a feeling that would be the case. "But that means you use the money I've been sending to cover it, right?" Upon hearing this, my mother responded somewhat angrily. "What? Are you trying to dictate how we use the money you send?" "I'm not trying to dictate, but I send that money to help support the household. Using it for Claire's driving lessons is completely different from what I intended." My father tried to mediate our argument. "But she's important too. Claire is family, isn't she? I saved up to buy Dad a luxury car, a gift meant entirely for him. Why then would you give it to Claire?" My father always finds himself caught between us, unable to say much in front of my mother. My mother said, "You shouldn't worry about such minor details. We manage our finances well, and there's nothing wrong with what we're doing." I couldn't agree with what my mother was saying. "No, that's not it. I make sacrifices in my own life to send money every month, and it feels incredibly unfair for that money to go to Claire, who doesn't even work. If she wants a license, she should earn the money herself." I was shocked to learn that the money for my sister's driving lessons came out of the funds I had been sending each month for household expenses. For a long time, I had been sending money every month as part of living expenses, without deeply considering how it was being used. However, it appears that the money wasn't being used in a way I would agree with. Upon learning this, I felt very conflicted. At that moment, my feelings changed dramatically. After much deliberation, I decided to immediately stop paying the remaining loan payments. Of course, I also stopped the payments for living expenses. I realized just how unfair this situation was to me. I felt pressured by my mother's words, as if expressing any dissatisfaction would upset her. Even if I followed her words, I realized that I needed to value my own feelings. Soon after, my father sent several apologetic emails and called me, but I ignored them due to another shocking development. It came to light that the car's ownership had been transferred to my sister, and naturally, the bills for the car began to arrive for her. This too ended up having an impact in a way that I had not intended. My sister called me right after receiving the bill. "What the heck are you doing? You can't just stop the car loan like that. Why should I be receiving this bill?" "Calm down, let me explain. Yes, I've been paying the loan, but now that you've taken over the car, it's only right that you start paying," I responded. "Huh? What are you talking about? Since you started the payments, you should just continue. What am I supposed to do when you suddenly say that? The reason I was paying for it was initially for Mom and Dad, but now, there's no reason for me to continue. If you've taken the car, you should take on the responsibility." "Why should I take the responsibility? I don't have the money, and it's impossible for me to suddenly take over the payments." It was hard for me too. I sacrificed my own life, saving for the loan and remittances, but I've been silent about it until now. I owe you nothing, and I shouldn't have to pay the loan for someone who doesn't work and always relies on our parents. Don't just decide things on your own terms. Think it over, and then let's talk. Aren't you supposed to cooperate as a family? I've already cooperated enough with Mom and Dad. This time, I won't step back, because it's pressing on my life. Use this as an opportunity to find a job and become independent. Don't joke with me. Anyway, I can't accept such a unilateral decision. I will never forgive you." Afterwards, I received numerous messages from our parents. They pleaded for me to forgive my sister and to continue paying off the loan. They also wrote that they hoped I would help my sister so she wouldn't struggle in the future. However, I had many unresolved issues and couldn't accept their requests. While considering our parents' pleas, I knew I needed to confront my own feelings. This whole series of events made me deeply reflect on my relationship with my family. Despite being born to the same parents, I started to feel like I had been used just for my sister's sake. I expressed my gratitude to our parents but firmly told them that my sister should become independent and take over the loan payments. Unable to bear the burden anymore, and overwhelmed by accumulated grievances, I decided to stop the remittances and blocked their contacts. I believed I had fulfilled my role and obligations as a family member, but it shouldn't continue at the expense of my own life and emotions. From now on, instead of meeting their expectations, I have decided to forge my own path. Being family, I firmly believed I should prioritize my own happiness and future. Recently, a relative told me about the situation with our parents and my sister, Claire. My sister started looking for a job to continue the loan payments. However, having spent most of her time playing, she had no work experience and struggled to find a job. The first job she found ended quickly due to problems, and she was fired almost immediately. She caused trouble and didn't get along with colleagues, making it difficult for her to keep a job. My sister also lacked perseverance and the will to adapt to new environments, leading her to repeatedly change jobs. The situation where she couldn't keep a job added pressure, making job hunting increasingly difficult. It seemed my sister hadn't developed a sense of responsibility for working due to our parents' continued support. Lacking the resolve to earn the necessary funds for living and unable to discipline herself, she easily gave up. This led to a worsening situation where she couldn't keep a job. Eventually, she started borrowing money from her boyfriend, and when the amount grew and she continued not to repay, he reportedly notified the police. Our parents contacted me through a relative, asking to pay for her legal fees, but I refused. I think the situation is a fair price for having indulged her all this time. Not only my sister but also my parents were clearly struggling after I stopped sending money. Since that incident, my father has been moving forward with divorce proceedings, which my mother opposes because it would further strain her financial situation. However, my father's decision seems unwavering. I prioritized my own life and future, sticking to my decision. Consequently, both my parents and sister couldn't afford the car loan payments and had to sell the car eventually. Selling the car allowed them to repay part of the loan and slightly reduce their debt in a desperate attempt to manage their living expenses. I truly see this as nothing but the result of my parents' long-standing indulgence towards my sister. Years after cutting ties with my family, I finally feel liberated from my emotional burdens and can focus on my own life. I still receive emails from my father. The main content of his messages includes apologies for betraying my feelings and reflections on his inability to stand up to my mother, who favored my sister. He expressed a desire to spend time together again as father and daughter. I'm considering reaching out to my father after the divorce mediation with my mother has settled. Many might think that both my mother and father are equally to blame. However, regardless of what anyone says, I am not considering severing ties with my father. Professionally, things are going well. I was appointed as a manager last month. In this new position, I experience daily challenges but also a strong sense of fulfillment. I often feel that my growth and achievements are directly reflected in my work, and I'm truly glad to have this opportunity. I'm fortunate to have supportive colleagues and superiors, allowing me to be myself without undue stress, making my days fulfilling. In my private life, I now have ample time to pursue my hobbies and interests. I spend tranquil and happy hours traveling with friends on weekends or enjoying cooking at home. Previously, I was burdened by familial conflicts, but now, free from those, I deeply appreciate the joy of living independently. Moving forward, I plan to continue living true to myself, cherishing my own happiness,